And okay. Recording. This recording is being done on August 1st, 2024 at 8:30 in the evening. You know, fun fact, I actually intended on getting this going earlier in the week. However, I had a very long and enjoyable weekend, but it also left me very, very wiped. Not so much mentally, but like physically wiped. I just bottomed on out. And yeah, I needed a couple of days to recover. Screw it. I'm 40. Also, if you happen to hear meowing in the background, that would be my cat Bones, who is not happy that the door is shut. She will wind up doing this for the entirety of this recording, I'm sure. But, alright, so, this is, I think actually when I created the last recording, I didn't have the name on this. So, welcome to Some Idiot Reads. Hi, I'm Some Idiot, and I'm going to read stuff. Right now, that is the Mandate for Leadership Project 2025. Yay. Last recording wound up only getting halfway through the initial foreword, so I'm not going to do nearly as long as the intro as I did on the last one. I'm just going to dive in and try to keep this at an hour and a half, no longer. Alright, so last bit was talking about, I don't know, some BS. Go back and watch the other video. Alright, where are we at here? Promise number 3. Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats. The United States belongs to we the people. All government authority derives from the consent of the people, and our nation's success derives from the character of its people. The American people's right to rule ourselves is the obverse. Don't see that word that often. Obverse of our duty. Okay, actually, I'm curious. What does obverse mean? Obverse. The side of a coin or metal bearing the head or principal design. Okay, hold up. You ever get those moments where you get like just little film in your eye and you just got to clear it on out? Pain in the butt. So, corresponding to something else as its opposite or counterpart. So, the people's right to rule ourselves is the opposite of our duty? We cannot outsource to others our obligation to ensure the conditions that allow our families, local communities, churches and synagogues, and neighborhoods to thrive. The buck stops with each of us, so each of us must have the freedom to pursue the good for ourselves and those entrusted to our care. To most Americans, this is common sense, but in Washington, D.C. and other centers of leftist power like the media and the academy, this statement of basic civics is branded hate speech. No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm genuinely curious to see someone actually give me an example of how that is legitimately hate speech. How personal responsibility or the right to self-determination is a form of hate speech. Progressive elites speak in lofty terms of openness, progress, expertise, cooperation, and globalization. But all too often, these terms are just rhetorical Trojan horses concealing their true intention, stripping we the people of our constitutional authority over our country's future. America's corporate and political elites do not believe in the ideals to which our nation is dedicated: self-governance, the rule of law, and ordered liberty. They certainly do not trust the American people, and they disdain the Constitution's restrictions on their ambitions. I mean, I don't disagree. Instead, they believe in a kind of 21st century Wilsonian order in which the enlightened, highly educated managerial elite runs things, rather than the humble, patriotic working families who make up the majority of what the elites contemptuously call flyover country. All right, so I need to make a note and come back to that. Let me see. Skim quickly ahead. All right. We'll see if I can remember to loop back to this point. But, like, there's... No, I'm going to leave it alone. I will come back to a point, hopefully. All right. This Wilsonian hubris has spread like a cancer through many of America's largest corporations, its public institutions, and its popular culture. Those who run our so-called American corporations have bent to the will of the woke agenda and care more for their foreign investors and organizations than their American workers and customers. Yes, that is exactly how capitalism works. Capitalism functions not with any particular loyalty to nation or to any particular creed. The only thing that a free market capitalist institution, the only thing it's loyal to is itself and its own furtherance. That's how this works. Now, if you want a corporation, a organization, to wind up being loyal to the citizenry, then what you are talking about is a socialist institution, one that is accountable to the body public. Which I don't disagree with. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that's great. But, like, this is backwards. This is opposite day. And also, bent to the will of the woke agenda. You know what? For a moment, let's just say that's actually true. Let's not even argue that point. So maybe they are bent to the will of the woke agenda. What that says to me is that the woke agenda is the one that is actually the what's the word I'm looking for? Is the dominant paradigm, or at least the one that is most worth investment. Is the one with the greatest degree of longevity. Businesses operate on what is a good investment. That is how these things go. So if a business is investing in the liberal woke agenda, just the woke agenda, then that is because that's the better investment. So, like, I feel like this is kind of a self-own, but also trying to twist it up in some sort of, like, rhetoric and propagandizing. Not so much hate speech, just it's fucking propaganda. Screw this. Today, nearly every top-tier U.S. university president or Wall Street hedge fund manager has more in common with a socialist European head of state than with the parents at a high school football game in Waco, Texas. No, that is patently incorrect. Not when they are in a position of leadership of their corporation. Do you not understand what the word socialist means, Kevin? It's been like a week and a half since I looked you up on Wikipedia, but I'm pretty sure you were born at the tail end of the McCarthy era, so, like, I get it. You don't understand what words mean here. But, homie, you're supposed to be a friggin' historian. Did you not, like, look at what these things mean? Come on. Seriously. This is sad. Many elites' entire identity, it seems, is wrapped up in their sense of superiority over those people. Not necessarily going to disagree with that. At least not for a lot. That's a nuanced conversation in my experience with individuals who are more economically affluent. It really varies. I'll still stand by the sentiment. There's no such thing as an ethical billionaire. Like, that does not exist. That cannot exist. But in terms of character outside of that, honestly, it can vary. But under our Constitution, they are the mere equals of the workers who shower after work instead of before. No. Well, yes, but also no. We have given free market. Like, I'm not in favor of this. I'm not a fan of the absolute shit show that this has become in this nation. Thanks, Reagan. Um, but like, legally, yes, they are no different from me or you watching this video. But like, in terms of the power they wield, like, I'm not going to sit down. These things are multifaceted. Like, yes, in one regard, they are the same. In another regard, they are not. It's like saying an apple and a steak are the same thing because they're both food. But they are also very different. Not in an ethical stance, not in any maybe a subjective, not in any objective, particular cosmic sense. I'm still tired, apparently. But there are differences. Which, okay. All right. I'm sure there's a point somewhere in here, and I'm really hoping I will land, like on my end. And I'm hoping I'll land it. All right. This is as it should and must be. Intellectual sophistication, advanced degrees, financial success, and all other markers of elite status have no bearing on a person's knowledge of the one thing most necessary for governance, what it means to live well. Bullshit. I'm actually going to call complete bullshit on that. Not that one cannot have an understanding of what it means to live well. We have to actually break this down first. The concept of live well. What does that mean? Is there a objective metric? Now, I'm sure they're going to... Kevin here, I'm pretty sure it was Kevin. I'm sure he's going to detail what is living well. But if you haven't caught on, I'm something of a moral relativist at times. There's a lot of relativity when it comes to morality, which, hey, look around and talk to 12 people. You're going to get 12 different views on the world. Very similar in some ways, but dramatically different in others. To the point, we have to sit down and we have to define what does living well mean. And I would argue that is a completely subjective assessment from person to person. Furthermore, the concept of like saying intellectual sophistication has no bearing on their knowledge of what is necessary for governance. Also, what is that? It has no bearing on knowledge of living well. No. If you take a toddler and you raise them in a closet with no human interaction, no schooling, do not teach them any language or anything like that, they are by default lacking intellectual sophistication. And I'm pretty positive they would have no idea what it means to live well. Furthermore, philosophers, existentialism, any branch of philosophy and thinking about thinking is entirely in the pursuit of understanding meaning, such as what does it mean to live well. There's countless individuals that devote themselves to trying to understand these and push the borders of what they know to broaden their intellectual pursuits so that they can then have a better understanding of themselves, the world, and where those two things interact and intersect. That, it's not to say that one has to have a high degree of schooling. I'm not saying somebody has to have, a college doctorate in order to have an understanding of what it means for themselves to live well. But to sit down and completely just throw aside the markers of intellectual progress and say, no, that has no bearing. Come on. No. Though I suppose, by that token, he is acknowledging right here with that sentence that he is totally fine with an individual such as myself, not college educated, aside from the couple of classes I sat in while I was squatting, not college educated. I have just as much valid input as he does. And it doesn't matter that I don't have a history degree. So, And also on the point of like, oh, I don't have a history degree. You know what? Sure, if we're debating history, I have no comparison to him. But we're not debating history. We're debating governance. Anyway. All right, so that knowledge is available to each of us, no matter how humble our backgrounds or how unpretentious our attainments. It is open to us to read in the book of human nature, to which we are all offered the key just by merit of our shared humanity. I will agree with that. That is fair. One of the great premises of American political life is that everyone who can read in that book must have a voice in deciding the course and fate of our republic. Again, I do not disagree. However, that line feels like it undermines what your stated goal is, which is shove out the ones that you disagree with. Like, you're saying one thing and then you're completely going against it in another sentence. Like, whatever, dude. Progressive policymakers and pundits in America either fail to understand this premise or intentionally reject it. They enthusiastically support supranational organizations like the United Nations and European Union, which are run and staffed almost entirely by people who share their values and are mostly insulated from the influence of national elections. That's why they are eager for America to sign international treaties on everything from pharmaceutical patents to climate change to the rights of the child, and why those treaties invariably endorse policies that could never pass through the U.S. Congress. The United Nations. We do not exist in a bubble. We do not exist as a single entity in the rest of the world. Yes, there are shared values. There need to be lines agreed upon. This is the basis by which America and its states were founded. Much as we have states below, and counties below that, and cities and towns below that, above the nation, we have these international organizations. They are fundamentally no different in base principle from a state or county governance, outside of the fact they do not have the actual sovereignty over, another nation. Like, the UN does not have explicit sovereignty over the US. They cannot simply declare fiat, boom, here's this thing. But, the principle is the same. Like the progressive Woodrow Wilson a century ago, the woke left today seeks a world bound by global treaties they write, in which they exercise dictatorial powers over all nations without being subject to democratic accountability. I would like an example. That's why today's progressive left so cavalierly supports open borders despite the lawless humanitarian crisis their policy created along America's southern border. I'd have to sit and actually do some research on it, but I'm pretty sure a good chunk of that also can be attributed to American interference in, the politics of several South American states. I think that would be associated to at least some degree. I'm pretty sure we fucked around and now we're finding out. I could be wrong on that. It's worth looking into. How much has America fucked around with Latin America and caused the very destabilization that they are decrying here? They seek to purge the very concept of the nation-state from the American ethos, no matter how much crime increases or resources drop for schools and hospitals or wages, or how much resources drop for schools and hospitals or wages decrease for the working class. I'm reasonably certain crime has been on the decrease in general. Pretty sure. Maybe it was violent crime I'm thinking of. Resources dropping for schools and hospitals is a matter of budget allocations not being done appropriately for that. Like, well, actually, with hospitals, not that resources are dropping for hospitals, they were privatized. Like, that took it like that turned them into businesses. So fuck that. And with schools, they're not getting the tax dollars they need. I know several teachers, they do so freaking much. And wages decrease for the working class. Not so much that wages decrease, it's that we have not actually had any sort of increase to things like minimum wage since I graduated high school 20 freaking years ago. So, you know, if they're operating against the concept of the nation state, can you blame them? It's not like the nation state has exactly been helping the American people on the left or the right. Open borders activism is a classic example of what the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer called cheap grace, publicly promoting one's own virtue without risking any personal inconvenience. Kevin. Indeed, the only direct impact of open borders on pro-open borders elite is that the constant flow of illegal immigration suppresses the wages of their housekeepers, landscapers, and busboys. No. It doesn't suppress the wages of them. I mean, yes, it does, and that's also a problem, but like, these are also jobs. I want to say that there was a crisis in Cali at one point, or maybe it was in Texas. I know it happened a couple of years ago, where like, oh, we don't have immigrants coming in, and several jobs that immigrants wind up doing because they can't get anything else. Like, nobody wants to work those crap jobs, not for the rate of pay that they're going to be paid. So like when we started having, illegal immigrants not showing up anymore, or showing up in smaller numbers or in hiding, what have you, it actually caused a small crisis, which is sad because they should be paid a fair amount. Like, it actually doesn't need to be a thing where like they're paid any less. Okay. Cheap grace aptly describes the less love affair with environmental extremism. Those who suffer most from policies environmentalism would have us enact are the aged, poor, and vulnerable. It is not a political cause, but a pseudo-religion meant to baptize liberals' ruthless pursuit of absolute power in the holy water of environmental virtue. At its very heart, environmental extremism is decidedly anti-human. Stewardship and conservation are supplanted by population control and economic regression. Environmental ideologues would ban the fuels that run almost all the world's cars, planes, factories, farms, and electricity grids. Abandoning confidence in human resilience and creativity in responding to the challenges of the future would raise impediments to the most meaningful human activities. They would stand human affairs on their head, regarding human activity itself as fundamentally a threat to be sacrificed to the god of nature. Okay, Kevin, I don't know if you've stepped outside at all in the last year or so and really looked around. Human activity has been a fundamental threat to humanity. And honestly, even less human activity, more rampant, unregulated capitalist activity. Because, as mentioned earlier, capitalism does not care, except for its own gain. The, classic adage, fuck you, I've got mine. That is what is getting us into this place. It is not, it is anti-human in the sense that we kind of need to have this reined in really hard, but it's no more anti-human than it is to say stopping a toddler from eating a box of crayons is anti-human. They're going to just do the thing. It's what a toddler does. Stopping them is not denying them their human nature. It is helping them become a better individual. Presumably. I think they're non-toxic now. The point being, this is all fear mongering and scare tactics for that. The world is on fire. We are dying. And frankly, Kevin's not going to live long enough to actually see how bad it gets. That's not a personal threat against him, not in the slightest. He's just an old ass man. He's going to die of old age before we wind up seeing the worst of what has been being laid for decades. I'm going to see it if I die of old age. My friends' kids are going to see it, and they're going to have to live through it. Not a fan. Also, stewardship and conservation supplanted by population control and economic regression. I'm sorry, didn't Trump wind up going through and like completely demolished a nature preserve? Didn't he actually like completely demolish it just because he wanted to have his fucking wall? Like, come on. Like, that was an entire thing. Don't sit here and try and be like, oh no, the conservative side is so much better. Oh, fuck you, suck a dick. The same goals are the heart of elite support for economic globalization. For 30 years, America's political, economic, and cultural leaders embraced and enriched Communist China and its genocidal Communist Party, while hollowing out America's industrial base. What may have started out with good intentions has now been made clear. Unfettered trade with China has been a catastrophe. It has made a handful of American corporations enormously profitable while twisting their business incentives away from the American people's needs. For a generation, politicians of both parties promised the engagement with Beijing would grow our economy while injecting American values into China. The opposite has happened. American factories have closed. Jobs have outsourced. Our manufacturing economy has been financialized. And all along, the corporations profiting failed to export our values of human rights and freedom. Rather, they imported China's anti-American values into their C-suites. With the exception of that last bit, not entirely wrong here. I mean, this, again, capitalism. Though I don't know about the anti-American values into their C-suites. Again, capitalism. It doesn't care. Even before the rise of big tech, Wall Street ignored China's serial theft of American intellectual property. No, there's just nothing that the Chinese government has been willing or able to do, to actually stop it. I'm pretty sure they don't give a shit, and they laugh. What can we do? I mean, I suppose we could go invade China. If you really feel that strongly about it, are you advocating we invade that sovereign state so that we can enforce and impose our rule of law on theirs? I'm not saying it's right. I'm just recognizing what the fuck this is. It outright cheered the elimination of American manufacturing jobs. Learn to code, they would gloat. No. I mean, businesses would have cheered the elimination of that, but not because of any anti-American sentiment, but more because economically it's a better option. If they have to pay workers less, and the amount of cost to re-import goods from that nation still results in a net profit versus housing the work here, then they're just going to go do that. Because why not? It's a sound investment. And as far as the whole learn to code, were you beat up by a nerd at some point, Kevin? Like, yeah, learn to code. Because we live in a staggeringly high-tech environment where programming is necessary. I don't know what to tell you on this one. They were just the price of progress. Engagement was at every step Engagement was at every step Beijing's project, not America's. The Chinese Communist Party dictated terms only to break them whenever it suited them. They stole our technology, spied on our people, and threatened our allies, all with trillions of dollars of wealth and military power financed by their access to our market. I mean, yes. We've also done the same, I'm pretty sure. I mean, not maybe not in exactly the same way, or maybe as not as openly, but like we're not any less guilty of doing shit too. And I'm not saying this in a sense of like whataboutism or like, you know, the not me is it whataboutism? There's an entire like concept in Russian propaganda. I can't remember exactly what it was. Where like equivalent, like the equivalency makes it okay. I'm not saying it's okay. This is a problem here too, but don't try and sit, what I'm calling on is don't try and sit down and say, oh, we're good, they're bad. No, we're both bad, Kevin. We are both responsible for doing some fucked up shit. Then there came the rise of big tech, which is now less a contributor to the U.S. economy than it is a tool of China's government. Incorrect. It's patently incorrect. It's not a tool of China's government. It's a tool of its own use. If it winds up getting a better investment from China, then it will wind up pandering to China. If it gets a better investment from the U.S., it will pander to the U.S. It's mercenary. In exchange for cheap labor and regulatory special treatment from Beijing, America's largest technology firms funneled data about Americans to the CCP. I mean, sure. Yeah. They get profit off of it. So, again, I'm not endorsing it. I'm recognizing what it is. They hand over sensitive intellectual property with military and intelligence applications to keep the money rolling in. They let Beijing censor Chinese users on their platforms. Yes, because Beijing has its own set of laws, and if they wish to operate within China, they have to follow those laws. Much like if they wish to operate in the United States, they have to follow the United States' laws. This is called government and law and order, Kevin. They let CCP set their corporate policies about mobile apps. Second verse, same as the first. And they run interference for a rival's political priorities in Washington. One side of big tech companies' business model is old-fashioned American competitiveness and world-changing technological innovation. But increasingly, that side of these businesses is overshadowed by their roles as operatives in the lucrative employ of America's most dangerous international enemy. You have such an infantile view of how this works. I mean, assuming this is an accurate representation of what you think, you're such an adorable little potato. If you want to understand the danger posed by collaboration between tech and CCP, look no further than TikTok. Highly addictive video app used by 80 million Americans every month and overwhelmingly popular among teenage girls, is in effect a tool of Chinese espionage. Is this because your social media channel failed, Kevin? The ties between TikTok and the Chinese government are not loose, and they are not coincidental. Listen, I as much as I work in the IT industry, I never really dove too terribly deep into like the implications of what the hell is going on with TikTok. From my understanding, yes, there's data that's been gathered and mined, and there are some concerns to actually actually do exist with the application in and of itself. But like, I also have heard things where it's been overblown. I'm not actually personally terribly sure on this one. Much as I'm reasonably certain he's not. He's in the same boat as me. I'd be willing to bet. He probably has been told it is this. Here you go, and just ran with it because he's a fucking history major. He doesn't know IT. Whatever. Okay. Let's see. The same can be observed of many U.S. colleges and universities. Through the CCP's Confucius Institutes, Beijing has been just as successful at compromising and co-opting our higher education system as they have at compromising and co-opting corporate America. A casual reader might take the last few pages as surveying a broad array of challenges facing the American people and the next conservative president. Supranational policymaking, border security, globalization, engagement with China, manufacturing, big tech, and Beijing compromised colleges. I love how you just sat for like one paragraph with no backing of just like, oh, also, the Chinese are messing with the colleges. Anyway, at least you tried with the IT one, dude. Okay. But these are really not many issues, but two. One, that China is a totalitarian enemy of the United States, not a strategic partner or fair competitor. Accurate. And two, that America's elites have betrayed the American people. Also accurate. The solution to all of the above problems is not to tinker with this or that government program to replace this or that bureaucrat. These are problems not of technocratic efficiency, but of national sovereignty and constitutional governance. We solve them not by trimming and reshaping the leaves, but by ripping out the trees, root and branch. Okay. I'm not saying I disagree particularly. Let's carry on. International organizations and agreements that erode our Constitution, rule of law, or popular sovereignty should not be reformed. They should be abandoned. Yeah, sure. Illegal immigration should be ended, not mitigated. The border sealed, not reprioritized. I think you're just scared of brown people. Economic engagement with China should be ended, not rethought. I'm going to stay on the fence on that one. Our manufacturing and industrial base should be restored, not allowed to deteriorate further. Again, you're talking socialism. That's the only way to actually address that. Like, that's not how unregulated or lower regulated capitalism functions. If you want to have lesser regulation on capitalist institutions, you literally cannot do that. They'll just leave. Why would they stay? It's like if I went to McDonald's and every burger I got was actually a patty of fried poo, I would just go to a different McDonald's. Why would I want to stay there? Universities taking money from the CCP should lose their accreditation, charters, and eligibility for federal funds. I'm actually curious here. Let's see. How many colleges accept money from the CCP? No, CCP, not CCO. Oh, seriously, is that it? Really? When was that? That was in 2020. All right, Foreign Committee on Government Affairs. The last 15... When was this? When was this? This was in 2020. No, I want something more recent. New York Post... Okay. Yeah, no, that actually does seem like that's a thing. Was not aware of that. So, that's interesting to note. Okay. Should they lose their accreditation, charters, and eligibility? If they are a private institution... then, by the way, everything is done at this point in time. No, they shouldn't. I mean, maybe they should lose their eligibility for federal funds. That's entirely plausible. But, if they are a state institution, something, owned and operated by the government in and of itself, then in that case, sure. Like, if it's determined that this foreign government is itself a existential threat or national enemy, I mean, that would make sense. That's how that would work. The next conservative president should go beyond merely defending America's energy interests, but go on the fence, asserting them around the world. America's vast reserves of oil and natural gas are not an environmental problem. They are the lifeblood of economic growth. No, they're going to kill us all. These are not sustainable. You are an idiot. Shut up. I say as I continue to read. American dominance of the global energy market would be a good thing for the world and, more importantly, for we the people. It's not just about jobs, even though unleashing domestic energy production would create millions of them. It's not just about higher wages for workers who didn't go to college, though they would receive the raises they've missed out on for 2 generations. Horseshit. Bullshit on that. That is not a matter of... That is nothing more than straight corporate greed. That is how this is always operated. There is no incentive to do anything more than pay the barest minimum you have to your employees. That is horseshit. All that's going to wind up doing is enrich the upper tier. The same as it has for 2 generations. Fuck you. Full spectrum strategic energy dominance would facilitate the reinvigoration of America's entire industrial and manufacturing sector as we disentangle our economy from China. Maybe. I believe that you're getting a couple of steps ahead. Like that feels a bit more dreamy. Globally, it would rebalance power away from dangerous regimes in Russia and the Middle East. That would be true. It would build powerful alliances with fast-growing nations in Africa and provide us the leverage to counter Chinese ambitions in South America and the Pacific. Locally, it would drive billions of dollars to private investment in the communities that have been hammered by globalization since the 1990s. And it would... private investment to communities? And it would clarify our intentions to Beijing that the next American president can ensure a large part of America's reindustrialization is in production of the equipment we will need to dissuade further foreign meddling with vital U.S. interests. You know what also would accomplish these sort of things? Investing into clean energy science and research, which is something that is actually progressively becoming more sustainable and is a renewable resource. I mean, the sun is a giant furnace. Like, and it just constantly emits energy. The more we can take advantage of that sort of a thing, or, natural currents of convection, also known as wind. There are countless different renewable energy sources that we can actually leverage that simply need more time put into them. Sitting down and going like, oh no, oil is the way to go. Oil is killing us. Promise number 4, secure our God-given individual right to enjoy the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that all men are created equal and endowed with God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness, that is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. This is one of those little... let me double-check this, because this is a little factoid that I have very much enjoyed. Let me find this. Okay. No. All right. I was actually incorrect on what I understood this to be. I originally thought that there was a that the line either was being misquoted from the Declaration, but it's looking more like it might have just been a first draft or something like that. I'll dig more into it later on. I was originally understanding the line to have been at one point life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, as opposed to happiness, just because of the way it was all like equivocating and all of that. But it appears I was actually wrong there. So, the pursuit of happiness is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. I'd argue the liberty part is more important, but Okay? When the founders spoke of the pursuit of happiness, what they meant might be understood today as, in essence, the pursuit of blessedness. No, on this one I think it was actually property, estate. That is, an individual must be free to live as his creator ordained, to flourish. Our Constitution grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. Okay. This pursuit of the good life is found primarily in family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. Many find happiness through their work. Think of dedicated teachers or healthcare professionals you know, entrepreneurs or plumbers, throwing themselves into their business. Anyone who sees a job well done as a personal reward. Religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Still others find themselves happiest in their local voluntary communities of friends, their neighbors, their civic or charitable work. That doesn't sound as though it's what one ought to do. Those are things that people enjoy doing. You've given no evidence that it is something that is required. Oh, I hate you. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individuals' right to live their best life or to enjoy what the framers called the blessings of liberty. It's this radical equality, liberty for all, not just of rights, but of authority, that the rich and powerful have hated about democracy in America since 1776. Agreed. They resent Americans' audacity in insisting we don't need them to tell us how to live. Agreed. It's this inalienable right of self-direction, of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdains. Yeah. With the Declaration and Constitution, our nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote to the Declaration as an apple of gold in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look at these documents when the elites mount their next assault on liberty. Left to our own devices, the American people rejected European monarchy and colonialism, just as we rejected slavery, second-class citizenship for women, mercantilism, socialism, Wilsonian globalism, fascism, communism, and, today, wokeism. To the left, these assertions of patriotic self-assurance are just so many signs of our moral depravity and intellectual inferiority. Proof that, in fact, we need a ruling elite making decisions for us. No, you are wrong. That is patently wrong. Speaking on behalf of the left here, my dude, we are not a fan of slavery, or second-class citizenship for women, or mercantilism. Socialism has its places. Socialism is, not a bad thing, considering what's happened with, even you've attested, the things you're calling for, regulation of business to serve the people. Sounds like you're on board with socialism. Again, I don't think you understand some words. Wilsonian globalism, not actually as familiar about Woodrow Wilson's policies, so. Fascism, not a fan of that. Communism, if you're talking about the totalitarianistic state that has been most prominently embodied as communism, then no. But again, words, meaning, it's totalitarian, authoritarian. Those are problems. Communism is economics. Every time I sit down and I tell my friends, don't worry about it, I'll cover you for food right now, you'll get me later. That's communism in action, buddy. And wokeism. Okay, whatever the hell on that. The next conservative president should be proud, not ashamed, of Americans' unique culture of social equality and ordered liberty. After all, the countries where Marxist elites have won political and economic power are all weaker, poorer, and less free for it. Yeah, can't really argue on that point. I have some complicated thoughts when it comes to how some of that's going on and how some of that has gone. I'm not going to dive into that one there, but he has an accurate assessment on that. So, the United States remains the most innovative and upwardly mobile society in the world. No. Hell no. I mean, maybe innovative in across the board, but upwardly mobile. Most upwardly mobile. Serious. Okay. Government should stop trying to substitute its own preferences for those of the people. I mean, yes. I don't disagree. But the way that it's supposed to work is that the governing is supposed to be the representation of the people as a whole. So, like, you're just butthurt because you don't get to see laws against brown people. And the next conservative president should champion the dynamic genius of free enterprise against the grim miseries of elite-directed socialism. Again, it's not socialism going on, dude. Most of what you have decried as elites, the promise of socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, fascism is not socialist. Fascism is a governmental approach, not an economic one. You're crossing your wires here. Whatever the name it chooses. It's simple. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. Okay. The promise of it is that government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes. Okay, yeah. The problem is that it has never done so. There's no such thing as the government. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power, and who, at almost every opportunity, wield it to serve themselves first and everyone else a distant second. This is not a failing of one nation or a socialist party, but inherent in human nature. I would disagree with your assertion that there is no such thing as a government, in the simple fact that as a conceptual idea and people working towards a common goal, then that formulates, like, that is a government in the same way a corporation exists. Disregard, the legalese and all of that. It is a group of individuals working towards a common endeavor. That is what establishes a business. Same deal when it comes to government or to a church bake sale. Any kind of organization of human beings, that collective organizing is what creates that context. So yes, there is such a thing as government. That being said, yeah, it is a common problem of human beings being extraordinarily self-serving. We're going to have leave the conversation alone for right now about human nature versus human nurture. That's not a conversation I'm going into right now. Though again, you're saying the promise is simple. It can ensure government control can ensure equal outcomes for all people. You were just advocating that businesses should be serving the American people. But the only way to ensure that happens is through government control. If you do not allow them to be governmentally controlled, they're just going to do what's best for them, whether or not that serves the American people. It's like you want to hold a gun to businesses' heads and go, I want you to help out my people, but I want you to want to help them and not do it because I'm holding a gun to your head. I think that tracks. Nighttime satellite images of the Korean Peninsula famously show the free market south lit up, with homes, businesses, and cities electrified from coast to coast. By contrast, communist North Korea is almost completely dark, except for the small dot of the capital city, Pyongyang, where a psychotic dictator and his cronies live. The same phenomenon is on display in the infuriating fact that 4 of the 6 richest counties in the United States are suburbs of Washington, D.C., a city infamous for its lack of productive industries. Is that true? For the 6 richest counties in the United States. Suburbs of Washington, D.C. 15 richest counties. Here we go. What do we got? So there is... No, we want to go to the richest. So this is the top 15 from December of 2023. Let's keep moving. And this is off of usnews.com. So, number 6 is Marin County, California. Number 5 is Fairfax County, Virginia. Which is a suburb of D.C. All right, so we got one. San Mateo County, California. Okay. Santa Clara County, California. Falls Church, Virginia. Okay. Wait, Falls Church. Well, that's a city. Well, whatever. Fine. We'll give it that. Loudoun County, Virginia. Also DC. Oh, that's listed as number 1. Okay. So, you know what? 3 out of 4. Maybe something changed in the time in between. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to quibble on that point. That being said, though, I'm a little bit thrown off here because you're saying North Korea is good because it's lit up, but suburbs of Washington, D.C. bad because they're lit up. But it's because they don't have industries. So what does being lit up actually mean? I'm trying to track the logic of this. And that doesn't... I'm not seeing it. Okay. We see the same corruption expressed on an individual level whenever billionaire climate activists who want to outlaw carbon-fueled transportation fly to A-list conferences on their private jets. No disagreement. That's fucking hypocritical. Or when COVID-19 shut down politicians like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were caught at the hair salon or dining at fancy restaurants after moralizing about how everyone must stay at home and forego such luxuries during the pandemic. Not going to disagree. Hypocritical as shit. For socialists, who are almost always well-to-do, socialism is not a means of equalizing outcomes, but a means of accumulating power. They never get around to helping anyone else. That's a very infantile way of viewing this. There's also a lot of other things that can be tied into it, such as saying, for example, if you're saying that that's an inherent quality of socialism in and of itself, I don't really know if that's actually the case. I mean, again, there's a lot of things about human nature that I've got a lot of thoughts on. I'm not going to go deep into it right now, but boil it down to when all that the bottom tier of people actually know, and like I'm including myself in this, when all that we grew up with is you need to sit down and say, fuck you, I got mine, or die, it's really hard to actually embrace a giving mentality when you're existing in a constant survival state. It actively encourages being cutthroat. And when you see people up at the top, the most powerful running corporations, who themselves get to that position by being that cutthroat, it further reinforces that you should be cutthroat. I'm not saying there aren't hypocrites that exist that ostensibly espouse for more socialist ideals. But to say the entirety of socialism in and of itself is simply a vehicle for that kind of a thing is disingenuous. The Soviet Empire was a social and economic failure. North Korea, despite the opulence of its tyrants, is one of the poorest nations in the world. North Korea does not. Don't even sit down. Well, you're talking about communism. Cuba is so corrupt that its people regularly risk their lives to escape to Florida on rafts. And yet you want to send them back. Because fuck you, I got mine, right? Because they're illegal immigrants. But they're trying to flee from a place that's terrible. But they should totally go back. But it's terrible. Come on. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Today, after a Marxist dictator took over, 94% of Venezuelans live in poverty. There is a note on that one. We'll get to that later on. Even Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont was forced to repeal the state's single-payer healthcare system just 3 years after creating it. Curious context on this. All right, popular opinion. I'm looking at Wikipedia for this one. First single-payer bill passed at the state level. Let's see. I'm not seeing really much here at a quick skim for why it wound up going away. Lack of internal specifics was causing providers anxiety. Yeah, let's see. I'd have to do more research on this one and why it fell apart. I'm not going to say that he's wrong on this one. I'm not a citizen of Vermont, and I have not really followed anything going on up there in that regard. There might be something to it, but I'd also be willing to bet there is more to it than just, yes, socialism. Where were we? In every case, socialist elites promised that if they could only direct the economy, everything would be better. Very quickly, everything got worse. In socialist nation after socialist nation, the only way the government could keep its disgruntled people in line was to surveil and terrorize them. Except I'm okay. Another quick Google check. Let's see. Let's see. Here we go. Marxist-Leninist states. There's like 4 currently. Non-Marxist-Leninist states. Let's see. There's the DPRK. Let's see. Eritrea, Guyana, Sri Lanka. Oh. Really? 4? Interesting. Hold on. Huh. They have all failed. India is a socialist government. How about that? Interesting. Portugal is. Bangladesh. I didn't actually know that. Anything else here? Non-socialist states with governing socialist bodies. Or governing socialist parties. Brazil, Chile, Iceland, Mexico's Labor Party. Huh. Ooh, list of anarchist community. No, no, I mustn't. Okay, stay on track. Anyway, um, many have failed and many have failed out. Again, I have some thoughts on that one, but I'm not going to wind up. I will argue that no, not everything has failed, but yeah, a large number of them have. By contrast, in countries with a high degree of economic freedom, elites are not in charge because everyone is in charge. People work, build, invest, save, and create according to their own interests and in service to the common good of their fellow citizens. If they want. But again, when it is a don't care as long as I've got mine and I get my high score, why do they have to care? There's a reason why the private economy hews to the maxim the customer is always right. While government bureaucracies are notoriously user-unfriendly, just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. It's not because grocery store clerks and PTA moms are good and federal bureaucrats are bad. It's because private enterprises, for-profit or non-profit, must cooperate to give to succeed. We're going to move on past that one. It's in the ideal, it is to cooperate and to give in order to succeed. But again, with the underlying premise of fuck you, as long as I get mine, this gets corrupted very fast. So as the American people take back their sovereignty, constitutional authority, respect for their families and communities, they should also take back their right to pursue the good life. Next president should promote pro-growth economic policies that spur new jobs and investment, higher wages, and productivity. I won't disagree with higher wages. I don't really know about productivity. We're already being way more productive than we actually are being paid for, and it's been that way for decades. Yes, that agenda should include overdue tax and regulatory reform, but it should go further and include antitrust enforcement against corporate monopolies. I don't inherently disagree with this. It should promote educational opportunities outside of the woke-dominated system of public schools and universities, trade schools, apprenticeship programs, and student loan alternatives that fund students' dreams instead of Marxist academics. So, just as important as expanding opportunities for workers and small businesses, the next president should crack down on crony capitalist corruption that enables America's largest corporations to profit through political influence rather than competitive enterprise and customer satisfaction. I don't disagree with that. Also, it sounds like you're outside of public schools and universities. Okay, moving on. Analogous pro-growth reforms for America's voluntary civil society are also in order. America is not an economy, it is a country. Economic freedom is not the only important freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the freedom to assemble also represent key components of the American promise. Today, in addition to the problem of big tech censorship, we see speakers at universities shouted down, parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school board meetings, and donors to conservative causes harassed and intimidated. The next conservative president must defend our First Amendment rights. I don't see a problem with speakers at universities being shouted down. I mean, that's just the student body enforcing their right to self-determinate, right? I thought that was okay. Parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school board meetings. I'd be curious to see your examples of that. And what exactly were they arrested for? Just because someone gets arrested doesn't mean there is no cause. So I'd be curious to see what that is. Donors to conservative causes harassed and intimidated. Yeah, I mean, that happens. But also, there's conservative causes like this, which I'm only 16 pages in and I already hate this. And it's like, you should not harass people. That's not okay. It gets complicated. Best effort. Ultimately, the left does not believe that all men are created equal. They think they are special. No? No. They certainly don't think all people have an unalienable right to pursue the good life. I think you've got your left and your right confused, my friend. They think only they themselves have such a right, along with a moral responsibility to make decisions for everyone else. They don't think any citizen, state, business, church, or charity should be allowed any freedom until they first bend the knee. That's a gross oversimplification. It is not to say that, we know, or the left knows better. Like, I presume. It's not a case of, the left knows better, the left knows this, the left knows that. But it's also not a case that bending the knee is inherently bad. If I have a group of individuals that believe they are morally correct in breaking people's kneecaps just because they fucking want to, taking a stance to force them to bend the knee to stop doing that is not a bad thing. I mean, hell, you're advocating similar things here, where there needs to be actions taken to force people to bend the knee to what you view as correct. I mean, it's tit for tat on this, motherfucker. That is just how this works. These are power dynamics. This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors. Our movement has not been united in recent years, and our country has paid the price. In the past decade, though, the breakdown of family, the rise of China, the Great Awakening, big tech's abuses, and erosion of constitutional accountability in Washington have rendered these divisions not just inconvenient, but politically suicidal. Every hour, the left directs federal policy and elite institutions. Our sovereignty, our constitution, our families, and our freedom are a step closer to disappearing. Conservatives have just 2 years and one shot to get this right. With enemies at home and abroad, there is no margin for error. Time is running short. If we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. But we should take the small window of opportunity we have left to act with courage and confidence, not despair. The last time our nation and our movement were so near defeat, we rallied together behind a great leader and great ideas, transcended our differences, rescued our nation, and changed the world. It's time to do it again. Now, as then, we know who we are fighting and what we are fighting for our republic, our freedom, and for each other. The next conservative president will enter office on January 20th, 2025 with a simple choice: greatness or failure. It will be a daunting test, but no more so than every generation of Americans has faced and passed. The conservative promise represents the best effort of the conservative movement in 2023, and the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. Okay. All right. Holy crap. I got done with it. And it only took an additional hour and 15 minutes to get through the back half of that. Jesus. All right. Section 1. Taking the reins of government. All right, so we're past the foreword. We're past Kevin's shit. So I believe this is actually getting into the meat of this document. Hopefully. America's bicentennial, which culminated on July 4th, 1976, was a spirited and unifying celebration of our country, its founding, and its ideals. As we approach our nation's 250th anniversary, which will take place during the next presidency, America is now divided between two opposing forces: woke revolutionaries and those who believe in the ideals of the American Revolution. Wow. Okay. Nice us versus them mentality, my dudes. Like, that's just textbook creating an enemy. The former believe that America is, and always has been, systemically racist, and that it's not worth celebrating and must be fundamentally transformed, largely through a centralized administrative state. We have been. And we are. And we do need to be fundamentally transformed. And we shouldn't be celebrating, that aspect. There are many things that you could sit down and celebrate about the nation, but not the systemic racism. Things can have multiple different aspects to them. Things can have different components to them. I'm having trouble actually thinking of one off the top of my head, not because I can't, but because I just spent an hour and a half going through that other crap. God, okay. The latter believe in America's history and heroes, its principles and promise, and in everyday Americans and the American way of life. They believe in the Constitution and the Republican government. Conservatives, the Americanists in this battle, must fight for the soul of America, which is very much at stake. So, Bill Cosby was a beloved icon for so many people for so long. He was a hero. Until it came out that he did a bunch of bullshit. And now he's not. Blindly revering the history and heroes, it leaves you open to having some serious issues with reckoning with previous historical events. Okay. Just 2 years after the death of the last surviving Constitutional Convention delegate, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln warned the greatest threat to America would come not from without, but from within. This is evident today. Whether it be mask and vaccine mandates, school and business closures, efforts to keep Americans from driving gas cars or using gas stoves, or efforts to defund the police, indoctrinate school children, alter beloved books, abridge free speech, undermine the colorblind ideal, or deny the biological reality that there are only two sexes. Oh my God. The less steady stream of insanity appears to be never-ending. It is not the biological reality that there are only two sexes. Look up the concept of intersex. There are several different sexes. Sex and gender are a complicated fucking thing. You fucking dipshit. There's not an effort to keep Americans from driving gas cars or using gas stoves. It's a recognition that these are very limited resources that are going to run out and also are gradually killing us all. Mask and vaccine mandates because people were dying in droves. And that was how you deal with it. It was like a martial law against a virus. Same deal with school and business closures. Defund the police does not mean dismantle the police. It means defund the militarization of the police. But it's way less catchy to say that. Indoctrinate school children. How? Alter beloved books. I mean, if they're racist or sexist or just some kind of fucked up. Abridge free speech. Yeah. Hate speech. undermine the colorblind ideal. Yes, because colorblind is not the way to go. That's just another form of fucking whitewashing. People of different ethnicities, different cultures, other than simple Caucasian, that, you know, has been the dominant paradigm here in the US for however fucking long, to sit and say, oh, well, I don't see that, is to say your ethnicity, your historical culture, all of that, it has no bearing. It doesn't mean anything, which is really fucking dehumanizing. The next American administration must stand up for American ideals, American families, and American culture, all things in which, thankfully, most Americans still believe. Highlighting this need, former Director of Office Management and Budget Ross Vaught writes in Chapter 2, quote, "The modern conservative president's task is to limit, control, and direct the executive branch on behalf of the American people." End quote. At the core of this goal is the work of the White House and the central personnel agencies. Article 2 of the Constitution vests all federal executive power in a president, made accountable to the citizenry through regular elections. Our founders wrote, quote, "The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America," end quote. Accordingly, Vaught writes, quote, "It is the President's agenda that should matter to the departments and agencies," end quote, not their own. Yes and no. The president is a director. The president is an individual directing things towards a common purpose. However, the president should also be mindful of individuals who are specialists in their fucking field. If I am directing the course of a thing, let's say I'm directing the course of a banquet, and I tell the chefs, I need you to make me a filet mignon out of this chicken. I can't get pissed off if the chef says no, because you can't do that. This is a really crappy example. I'm tired. Ugh. But, like, you get what I'm saying, right? Like, that, I don't like that. The president's agenda that should matter to the department and agencies. It's a intertwined affair. Like, the agency in and of itself, they need to be mindful of what their mandate is and be respectful of that mandate regardless of who is in the office of the presidency. The agency continues to exist regardless of who's in the big seat. And that to not be mindful and loyal to that mandate is itself a betrayal of the American people. Yet the federal bureaucracy has a mind of its own. Federal employees are often ideologically aligned, not with the majority of the American people, but with one another, posing a profound problem for Republican government, a government of, by, and for the people. As Donald Devine, Dennis Kirk, and Paul Dans write in Chapter 3, quote, "An autonomous bureaucracy has neither independent constitutional status nor separate moral legitimacy," end quote. Byzantine personnel rules provide the bureaucrats with their chief means of self-protection. What's more, knowledge of such rules is used to thwart the president's appointees and agenda. As Devine, Kirk, and Dans write, quote, "Managing the immense bureaucracy of the federal government is impossible without an understanding of the key central personnel agencies and their governing laws and regulations," end quote. Many of these laws and regulations governing a largely underworked, overcompensated, and unaccountable federal civilian workforce are so irrational that they would be comical in a less important context. I mean, I can allow for some of that to be the case. I don't know how much of it is. but certainly wouldn't hurt to overhaul and review. I'm not in any disagreement of doing an audit. I think that's a solid idea. Certainly. This is true whether it comes to evaluating employees' performance or hiring new employees. Only in the federal government could an applicant in the hiring process be sent to the front of the line because of a history of drug addiction or alcoholism, or due to morbid obesity, irritable bowel syndrome, or psychiatric disorder. I feel like that's hyperbole, but you're framing it in the context as though it's actually the case. You're doing a really crap job of illustrating what is hyperbole here. At least to the kind of... The next administration should insist that the federal government's hiring, evaluation, retention, and compensation practices benefit taxpayers rather than benefiting the lowest rung of the federal workforce. I don't have a particular disagreement with that sentence. In order to carry out the president's desires, political appointees must be given the tools, knowledge, and support to overcome the federal government's obstructionist human resources departments. More fundamentally, the new administration must fill its ranks with political appointees. Devine, Kirk, and Dans observe that, quote, the Trump administration appointed fewer political appointees in its first few months in office, end quote, than any other recent presidency. This left career employees in charge in many places. This can occur even after departments have been fully staffed with political appointees. Vaught writes the White House Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, should establish a, quote, reputation as the keeper of the commander's intent, end quote. Yet OMB is dominated by career employees who often try to overrule political employees serving in various executive departments. Empowering political appointees across the administration is crucial to a president's success. I'm not a fan of this. Because again, specialists, people that know what they do. There is benefit to be had in rotating individuals in and out, but not the entirety of it. That's a terrible idea, because there's plenty that you wind up losing. Furthermore, making it contingent on political appointment when there is rampant cronyism, and even called out in the foreword that human nature is intending to be self-serving, to go with that underlying premise, making it so that political appointees being rotated every 4 to 8 years at the whims of a single individual, who themselves is highly liable to be corrupt by your own sentiment, that's a terrible idea. Unless you're wanting to go ahead and serve a specific agenda. And not the will of the American people, but what you will for the American people. Above all, the president and those who serve under him must be committed to the Constitution and the rule of law. No disagreement. This is particularly true of a conservative administration, which knows the president is there to uphold the Constitution, not the other way around. If a conservative administration does not respect the Constitution, no administration will. In Chapter 1, former Deputy Chief of Staff to the President Rick Dearborn writes that the White House counsel, quote, must take seriously the duty to protect the powers and privileges of the president from encroachments by Congress, the judiciary, and the administrative components of departments and agencies. Yes, certainly. But that does not mean that the president, the office of the presidency, that the executive branch is itself not accountable to the other branches of government as well. This is a balance of powers. They are required to check each other. These checks and balances are fundamental and foundational to our republic. It's crucial that all three branches of the federal government... Equally important, the president must enforce the Constitution and laws as written, rather than proclaiming new law unilaterally. Presidents should not issue mask or vaccine mandates, arbitrarily transfer student loan debt, or issue monarchical mandates of any sort. Legislatures make laws in a republic, not executives. I mean, I don't disagree with the basic concept. However, No. You know what? I'm going to sit and say I agree with the basic concept that the president should not be in a position to actually like proclaim new laws in any sort of unilateral sense. I agree with that. That should be the mandate of Congress. That should be the mandate of Congress in that it that is the source of law and the judiciary is the interpretation of law. However, the office of the president still should be able to sit down and make specific orders as necessary because, as we've seen, Congress itself has routinely been gridlocked on things that need to happen. And frankly, an emergency mandate of like, oh, there are millions of people dying. Fuck your gridlock. Wear a damn mask. Or countless individuals are suffering under the yoke of crippling debt. On occasion, just cutting through the BS is not a bad call. It's not something that should be done lightly. But we also exist in a world and a context now where a lot of stuff is broken. It's complicated. It's crucial that all three branches of the federal government respect what Madison called the double security to our liberties, a separation of powers among the three branches, and the separation of powers between the federal government and the states. This double security has been greatly compromised over the years. Vaught writes that, quote, the modern executive branch writes federal policy, enforces that policy, and often adjudicates whether that policy was properly drafted and enforced, end quote. He describes this as, quote, constitutionally dire and in urgent need of repair, adding, quote, nothing less than the survival of self-governance in America is at stake. When it comes to ensuring that end quote. When it comes to ensuring that freedom can flourish, nothing is more important than deconstructing the centralized administrative state. Political appointees who are answerable to the president and have decision-making authority in the executive branch are key to this essential task. The next administration must not cede such authority to nonpartisan experts who pursue their own ends while engaging in groupthink insulated from American voters. No, I disagree with you on that one hard. I don't want a political appointee in charge of the EPA. I want someone who actually knows the science of that. I don't want a political appointee in charge of the Food and Drug Administration. That needs to be people that actually know what that field, what is associated in that field. Relegating that to political appointees? No, fuck you. The following chapters detail how the next administration can be responsive to the American people, not the entrenched elites, how it can take care that all the laws are faithfully executed, not merely those the president desires to see executed, and how it can achieve results and not be stymied by an unelected bureaucracy. All right. We're an hour and a half into this. I at least got past the foreword. And honestly, I'm feeling tired. And it's 10 o'clock now. Oh my god. This is going to be a slog. It didn't feel like 2 hours passed on this one, though. But, hey. I know... It feels like for me, a lot of this going through... There are either points where I am reading through this and I have what I feel is a valid thing to point out and to say, and coherent thoughts. But one thing I'll actually go ahead and give for this that is beneficial to me is recognizing areas where I have a impression or I have a ideological stance. But when it comes to the point of like, I need to articulate this to an audience and, you know, not do it through self-referential crap like I would normally would through friends. It's making me question how much I actually do know about certain topics. So that's actually neat to know. It's well worth analyzing that sort of a thing. I'm down for it. That said, I am still so very much like some of the foundational principles of this document and this approach are utterly alien to my conception of the world and to plenty of people's conception of the world. The individuals espousing this document in many ways fundamentally view the world in an incompatible way with a significant portion of the rest of the American public. Which I've always known to be the case, but like literally sitting down and just going like, no, screw it, let's read this. It just hammers it there. That's something to think about and to reckon with. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cut the recording off on this. If you've stuck it out through this all the way to this point, what is it? A little over an hour and a half. Thank you for joining me on the second installment for Some Idiot Reads. I'm going to keep going with this one until either I just get too tired of it or, I don't know, we'll see. Technical, I'm on page 23. It is 56 out of a 922-page document, so not sure how much filler is in here. I mean, maybe I'll just continue through the whole thing. I don't know. We'll see. I think part of it's going to depend entirely upon where we're at once we wind up. Like, if I'm not done with this by the time we get to, like, the actual fucking election, we'll see. Maybe I might take a break and pivot to something else. I don't know. Anyway, again, thank you for joining. And always take the time. Question whatever it is that you think that you know. Research it. Look into why you know what you know. Don't be afraid to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. You're wrong all the time. We are all wrong all the time. That is, I would argue, part of human nature. Is that we are always wrong in some way or form. And to rise above our nature is to seek an understanding of why we were wrong so that we can then do better. That sounds deep. Let me know in the comments if you think it actually is deep. I don't know. I'm just some idiot. Peace.